Hi class, Dr. Janacek here. Welcome to week 3 of the term. So we're going to continue building on a number of the writing strategies that we have been discussing. So last week you experimented with free writing as a method of pre-writing, and this week you will be working with another pre-writing technique known as mind mapping, which is particularly effective for those who are visual learners and thinkers. And this is something that you can do on the computer. You can, if you have like a paint program, or there is software, but I'm pretty sure it costs money, like MindView, unless you do the free trial. But for the purposes of this class, you can totally just draw out the mind map yourself. And in fact, I find that the most helpful rather than doing it digitally, because there's something for me when I make connection between like pen and paper, where a lot of times that's how I actually work through my thoughts, is through that very tactile experience of drawing or writing. So mind mapping, as you'll discover in the learning resources for this week, is where you start with like a topic bubble, what you're supposed to be writing on, and then you branch out and draw idea bubbles from there, so you can sort of see how ideas branch off, and what ideas are derivative from sort of these larger topics that can help you think about not only the development of your content, but also organization once you sort of take a look at the different points that you've thought about. So it's another pre-writing strategy you'll be working with. And last week you guys learned about direct quotes. This week we'll be thinking about another way to integrate secondary sources into our writing, and that's through summary. So usually you quote when you feel like the author has said that material, or phrased it in a way that just so perfectly captures the point, and you could not say it any better, or you need to use those words that the author said to prove a point. Like if you're trying to explain how, if you're trying to explain somebody's perspective on something, then you might need to quote them so that you can then, discuss their perspective or how they're saying it. So quoting matters, or quoting is useful when what the person said, how they said it, is significant. So the way in which they phrased it is particularly significant. You want to avoid block quotes in short papers, which are quotes that run 4 or more lines in a paper, and then so you have to offset them from the left margin a full inch. You shouldn't have big chunks of quotes in your writing when you're only writing like 900 words at this point. The idea is that if you're quoting, every word in that quotation should be important for your essay. And if you're quoting that long, then every single word, must be important, and so there's going to be like extra analysis required. And I just realized that the dishwasher is going in the background, so I apologize for the background noise. What else? Okay, so summary is particularly useful when you want to communicate an idea, but you don't need to quote the original source word for word. So if you're wanting to just give the gist of an idea, you can summarize. But you still need an in-text citation when you summarize, because you're still, capturing the author's ideas. So you're going to learn more about summary this week in section 9.4 of In Conversation, which is part of your assignment. And you are also going to learn more about writing an academic style. So one of the assignments is to read chapter 21 in Conversation, and that section is really crucial for improving your writing. So, a number of you are working through things that go beyond like comma splices and sentence fragments. This is actually not grammar, but academic style, so attending to the style of your writing. So using more formal diction means word choice, writing in the active voice is another strategy you'll learn in chapter 21, and that means, phrasing sentences actively. So instead of saying, the sandwich was eaten by me, you make the subject more active and explain up front who's taking ownership of that action. So I ate the sandwich sounds much better than the sandwich was eaten by me. People within the scientific and medical communities often use passive voice because they don't want, the research that they're writing about, the lab reports, etc., to sound subjective. They want to sort of take the humanity out of it, if you will, and report results in a way that seems really neutral. And so you'll see the passive voice within that genre of writing. It was discovered that yada yada yada. By saying it that way, it sort of makes it seem more objective, more neutral. But for writing in the humanities and for the majority of the writing that you'll do, business writing, technical writing, it's really important to write in the active voice. And so the differences between those two genres it leads to another, between the scientific community and other communities, leads to another point that we'll be discussing this week, which is what a discourse community is. So there are different groups of people and different communities that form discourse communities that have their own sort of expectations for how the exchange of information should occur. And so you're going to be reading John Swales's piece, Approaching the Concept of a Discourse Community, in which you'll learn 6 criteria that he gives for what constitutes a discourse community. It's not just any group of people. You might think about, can this online class be considered a discourse community? Does it function as one according to those 6 criteria? Some might say yes, and some might say no. And, if you explore this in your discussion forum post, it would be, not your discussion forum post, but in your paper for this week, it would be interesting to think about how a class does or does not function as a discourse community. I would say it does not, and I'll let you think about why that might be, which one of the criteria it might not fit for that scenario. So that's, a very interesting concept that's going to extend into composition 2. So I recommend that you read this piece, annotate it, which means take notes on it. You will see it again unless they revise Comp 2. So do spend time on that piece and thinking about what a discourse community means. So you'll read chapter 21 in your textbook, 9.4, Swales's article, and the resources on mind mapping. And then for Saturday, you need to create a mind map and you follow the instructions on what to do there, and that's due Saturday by 11:59 p.m. Then you have a discussion forum post, which is due Saturday at 11:59 p.m. to the initial post, in which you're going to think about a time where you learned as you were writing. Okay, so you might not have had the idea originally, or you might have been confused or anxious and not knowing quite what you were doing when you started, but through that process of writing, you learned, in some way, or worked through that, situation. So you can write about that, or a time when, God helped you with communication in some way. And so you might refer back to the welcome video and transcript in the AIM section of the Week 3 module, which gives some scriptures that talk about how the Holy Spirit can actually speak through us when we don't know the words. And one of God's promises to us is that when we don't know the words, God does. And so, don't be afraid of communication. Don't be afraid of, writing papers and saying the wrong thing. Try to work through it, learn through writing, let God speak to you through writing, and then of course, you can go back and revise as necessary, but but rest assured in that promise that He is there to help you with all of your communication, including assignments for class. So the initial post is due Saturday, and then 2 response posts due Tuesday. And remember that if people are asking you questions in your discussion posts, including me, you are supposed to answer them. So like even if you already do your 200-word posts and people ask you questions, going above and beyond in this class, showing that you're, really here, you're engaged, involves, responding to those questions as well. So please treat this like class conversation. If somebody were to ask you a question in class, even if you've already said 2 comments for the day, you wouldn't just like stare back at them. You would, respond to them. So give everybody respect, respond to the questions that they're asking you, even if it's, the next week. That is part of the class. You have another reading quiz on the learning resources that'll be due Saturday. And then for Tuesday, you have your second paper in which you summarize, so you'll be putting to work the strategy you're learning in section 9.4 of the textbook. You'll summarize what a discourse community is according to Swales. So you need to make sure that your words aren't just like sort of switched around and you're, mostly copying what he said. You need to explain what a discourse community is in your own words and cite it, because it's still Swales' idea, it's not your own, even if it's your own words. And then you need to list and describe in that paper, which should be organized like an essay with introduction, body, conclusion, and you might have more than one body paragraph. That organization is up to you, whatever you find most useful. List and describe 3 discourse communities in which you are a part. Okay, so remember, you need to use and apply the 6 criteria that Swales gives. So think about, whether those 3 communities are just communities, or whether they're actually discourse communities as defined by Swales. So there's a difference between just a community and a discourse community, because Swales has set very specific criteria for what constitutes a discourse community. And a number of them sort of might disqualify some of the organizations that you might be a part of. So yeah, that's 900 words, and that will be due Tuesday. So that's an overview of week 3. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and as always, I look forward to reading your work.